Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Okay.
Well, that was amazing because we are now live on the Must Read Alaska show. You got a special treat of the mayor blowing his nose, which is hilarious. But thank you, everybody, for tuning into the Must Read Alaska show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. And man, it is a sunny day here on the Kenai Peninsula. Things are looking awesome. And, for those of you that saw the presidential, I don't even know what you'd call it, I guess, speech last night, I'd be interested to hear what folks think about it in the comment zones. We've posted a couple memes about it. I've heard both from the Republicans and some Democrats on how they thought it was literally the worst speech backdrop that they've ever seen in their whole life.
Talk about the red one, the red backdrop.
Yeah.
I saw some of that.
And so without further ado, I want to welcome Mayor Jim to the Must Read Alaska show. Mayor Jim is the mayor up in Fairbanks. Mayor, welcome to the Must Read Alaska show.
John, I don't have a red background. Mine's more blurred. I think that's more appropriate for speaking. Or the Beatles one that I showed you earlier.
Yeah, the Beatles one's pretty cool. So, yeah. Mayor, tell us a little bit about how you first got involved in politics. We'll kind of get into Fairbanks here in a little bit, but give us that story about, what first spurred you on to want to throw your name in the hat and run for office.
Well, I appreciate that. First of all, thanks, John, for the time we're spending here on Must Read Alaska. I appreciate it very much. And, normally I cite high school when I got the bug, but if I go back a little bit further into the 70s, my parents were pretty active around Fairbanks with political campaigns, and we always had fundraisers and parties at my parents' house here on Kodiak Street. When I was little, I volunteered and helped on Governor Hickles' campaign when I was really little with my mom, and we gave out lollipops, which were like lollipops, but they were lollipops. It was kind of funny, and that was kind of fun. And I got to be around a lot of adults as a child. But really, what bit me the most is when I was in government class at Lathrop High School, and my government teacher, Terry Marquette, brought a TV set into the class that day. It was government honors class. And he said, we're not going to have class. We're going to turn the news on and watch the news. And what the news was President Reagan's attempted assassination. So we watched the live feed for a long time. And then I spent the next couple of weeks and months watching how he recovered and how he went back into the Senate chambers and just watching him. And then he was the president during my early 20s up until I hit 30. So watching him and then getting a job with the Chamber of Commerce and volunteering like crazy for different organizations led me to my very first race officially in 2000 when I ran for the borough assembly. There was a crowded field of 7 brand new first-time people running. So I didn't win that seat. And then life took a turn. I had more children. And then finally, by 2010 is when I decided to run for local city council, and I won. And I got reelected in 13, and I was really honored for that. And then I ran for mayor in 16 and then reelected again in 19. So 2010 is when really things took off with actually getting elected. But before that was a lot of building blocks that I was doing.
That's awesome. Well, and hearing a lot of folks' stories on the Must Read Alaska show, oftentimes I interview folks and they lost their first or second race. Tell me a little bit about, picking yourself up by the bootstraps and trying again. And do you think that that's important in the political world?
Yeah, I was speaking to a group of kids the other day who came to City Hall, and we were talking about political life and unsocial media and proper discourse and talking to people. We were going through all of that, and somebody asked me if I ever lost a race, and that was a good question. And I said, yeah, I actually lost in 2000. And, I wasn't happy that I lost, but I learned so much. And I had such a fun time running for that office, John, because like I said, there were 7 of us. and we were all branched, 6 or 7. It was a lot of people, more than ever. And so I came in second place in that race. Victoria Foote won, but I had so much fun running. And it was a borough seat, so it was a bigger swath of people. I learned that a lot of people want to tell you their issues, their opinions, some good, some not so good, but it really taught me how to learn more. And I was sharing with you before we went live that I was in radio for 20 years up here, from 84 through 2004, working in radio. And I did talk shows like you're doing, and I worked on the radio, and I worked with music. So I learned how to interview and talk. And so being a politician, and I hate the term, but that's kind of what we all are at times, it's sharpened my communication skills. So the loss in 2000 was no big deal. I figure it's kind of God's plan. I've been trying to following his plan as best I can, falling down, getting back up, and then here I am today.
Nice. Well, tell me, so for sometimes that, I talk to folks and they get a little confused because Fairbanks has a borough mayor, and then Fairbanks has a mayor for the city. Can you give us like a elevator talk on the difference of the two? There's a borough and there's a city, just so folks kind of get a clear picture of the kind of political structure up there.
I can. So I'm a visual learner. So, and because I'm a disc jockey, I will use this trusty compact disc. So in the center hole, this centered hole, that is Fairbanks. This outer rim is the borough. So we are a city in the middle of a borough. So that's where I'll start. And the city of Fairbanks is a home rule city, which simply means there's a strong mayor form of government, which means that I run the city council meetings. I'm in charge of all human resources and HR hiring and firing. And I oversee 200 employees that serve the 31,000 people in the city, the inner whole. Mayor Bryce Ward runs the borough around us. They're an unorganized, second-class borough. They're a second-class borough. And so his group is run by their presiding officer on the borough assembly, much like Anchorage. If you look at Anchorage, they're a borough, they're a municipality. So Mayor Bronson doesn't run his own meetings. The presiding officer does for the Anchorage Assembly. So Mayor Ward has his own scope of responsibilities, which is property taxes, zoning issues, and he doesn't have any police or fire because out in the borough, you've got volunteer fire departments and you've got the Alaska State Troopers who provide the police for the borough. Once in a while, of course, our city police department makes a run out to help. And that kind of thing. And then as city mayor, because we're a strong mayor form of government, I oversee police and fire, our own public works department. And my 4 main priorities for the city are police and fire protection, pick up your trash, and plow your roads. And along with plowing the roads is patching the roads and such. So those are my 4 basic duties. And then I partner with Mayor Ward, and farther up the road, there's a mayor in North Pole. And that's Mayor Mike Welch, and the 3 local mayors help one another. But something else kind of interesting, not only do you have the borough and you got the city, over here you got UAF, which is like its own individual government, which is the state. Then you got the Fairbanks Airport, which has its own fire and police. You got Fort Wainwright, which has its own fire and police. And up the road, you got North Pole, and then you got Eielson. So you got all these governmental agencies and people and departments all working together.
And you got Chena Hot Springs that's probably going to, annex out and become its own country here in a little bit.
We're such a huge area. There's 100,000 people. When people ask me how many people live in the interior, it's about 100,000, give or take.
It's a lot.
It's 100,000 people in a state that's huge. Like you said earlier, stretches from Minnesota down to Texas, from California to Florida, and all places in between. So, but we're a tight-knit group up here. We're so landlocked that we get along really well. I mean, we're not immune to problems and things, but on the whole, because we're so far up in the middle of the state and so landlocked, like I mentioned, it's not out of control. We've been able to work pretty well on the local issues. That's
awesome. So tell me a little bit about Fairbanks's economy, because, you're up there, you're trapped, you're landlocked. You do have a road to you, but it's a very unique situation. It's probably there's probably not too many cities like yourself around the United States that, it takes 4, 5, 6 hours to get from one super inhabited city to the, down to Anchorage. So tell us a little bit about the economy in Fairbanks, what makes it churn and what makes it burn.
It's a good question. Well, one of the biggest things for the interior is tourism. And we have a local entity called Explore Fairbanks. And Explore Fairbanks has managed to not only put Fairbanks and the interior on the map since the 80s, when it was first known as Fairbanks Convention and Visitors Bureau, the FCVB. They've also turned winter tourism as popular or more so than summer tourism. It's been amazing what they do. So that's a huge economic driver for us, which of course took a big hit. And I won't even say the C word because I'm trying to move past that whole thing. Let's write this last 2 years off as an anomaly, please, John. And then obviously we have coal in the interior out in Healy. We've got timber, tourism. We also have a lot of the native organizations and the native villages come into town for different things, and that's also economy driven. The state of Alaska employees are a huge part of our economy, which is the UAF and our campus. One of our hugest, that's not even the right word, sorry, big radio guy. Making up words.
You're making up words. I like it. I was never hooked on phonics, so.
Well, it's like that Will Ferrell strategery when he was playing George Bush. Anyway, we can't forget, the military. The military, Fort Wainwright and Eielson, I often say that we'd be a ghost town without the military because they come here, they raise their families here, they buy homes here, they rent here, and we have the largest number of retirees, military retirees in the whole country. In Alaska, not just here, but the whole state. So the military, the university, the state employees, the cannabis, obviously, since it's been legalized, has leaned into being an economic driver in some ways too. So there's several economics in Alaska and in Fairbanks, but tourism, UAF, the state of Alaska government employees, military, those are big ones.
Well, that's nice to have some of those, foundational blocks for your economy, because oftentimes when you don't have, you guys have several, oftentimes communities don't even have one. So, count your lucky stars that you have that, because, man, I live out here on the Kenai Peninsula, and when Agrium left, it was a huge hit. So I think that it's good to have stuff like tourism and, the university and military to kind of be that foundation of your economy. So one of the things I saw a couple weeks, I think it was like last week, and I posted the picture on our Must Read Alaska page, was a picture of a Healy electrical vehicle charging station, and on it there's a big sticker that says "Powered by coal."
I saw that. I saw that picture. Boy, that sure is turned into some
funny.
It is a little. And there's another picture I saw of a gas-powered car bringing a generator to an electric car.
I've seen that. So
and charging up. It is kind of funny. There's no reason why these things can't coexist. I understand the market for. I do, but you can't deny the irony and the humor around it. I mean, it's humorous, of course. And so we need to laugh a little more at this kind of stuff. And if you want to buy an electric car, go ahead. I mean, I can't imagine our entire country moving from A to B, which has been talked about on a major scale, in the country. No, we have 330 million people in this country, John, and every one of them are free. Every one of them are free. So when you have that many people with that much freedom, which I wouldn't trade for anything, you're going to have differences of ideas, opinions, and people who think differently, which is a blessing to our country. We're not all like this and have the government telling us to think one way.
Yep. So what are does Fairbanks have, some major projects that, I'm sure that since you've been mayor there since 2016, maybe you've been working on some huge federal project or state conjunction project. What are some of those projects around the city or borough that are maybe on the cuspice of getting started or getting completed that you're excited about?
Well, if you ask the average citizen in town today what's frustrating them the most this summer, they'll tell you construction work. And I have to agree with them. I'm very optimistic and I'm always positive. Hey, when it's done, it's going to be great. But you can't deny the fact that every road you turn on, there's cones and they're redirecting you. So, and that's good. There's some local projects we're doing in conjunction with the state and big state projects. We're replacing some bridges, which is fantastic. We have some of the oldest bridges in the country up here. And we have a new one that got put up last year. Now they're working on our main one downtown, the Cushman Street Bridge. So I'd say road construction projects are huge right now, and we're getting a lot done. Because when you live in the Arctic, you know, all the roads take a beating all the time. You're constantly repairing, you're constantly filling holes, you're constantly filling potholes. So that's a big one. In recent months, since I've been mayor, and the new mayor will take over in a few months, is the Polaris building. You've heard the stories about the Polaris building. I personally like to thank, you know, the interior delegation. The main thrust behind this was Senator Murkowski, but Senator Sullivan certainly rang the bell on that, and so did Congressman Young when he was alive. And now we have a $10 million pot of money that came through the infrastructure program. Wow. Through one of those buckets, because we don't have that kind of money, John. The city of Fairbanks is very lean ran. It's just, we don't have tons of money laying around after we pay all the bills, which is good. We don't want to collect more than we need. And we just didn't have $10 million. And it's our largest building downtown. It's our little skyscraper, because that's, you know, it's our tallest building that needs to come down. So that's going to come down next summer under someone else's watch, but it doesn't matter. It was a huge score for Fairbanks that we got that money. All right. Nice. And other projects are tearing down problem properties, tackling homelessness, opioid issues, which are bad things. But when you're making headway, that's a project that you like to see, right? Major project. And then the state's got a huge roundabout. I'm sure you've seen the stories on the GARS roundabout right in front of Fort Wainwright. There's a lot of jokes around roundabouts. You know, I use them properly. They never really give me a problem. Yeah, they can be confusing. I get all that, but it also helps the flow of traffic. So it's a love-hate thing up here with roundabouts. So there are a lot of projects that are going on around town.
That's awesome. Why do you think there's, you know, never been that gas line that has come up to Fairbanks? Always, it seems like every time we have a big, governor's race or something like that, it seems to be mentioned. It doesn't ever seem to be a focal point, but it seems, you know, folks mentioning it and then they'll look into it and then nothing happens, and then they'll look into it and nothing happens. Why do you think it's never happened? What's your take on it?
Everything always boils down to politics and money when you talk about these large things. If you go to the Fedco offices in town, which is the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation, they've got a great poster on their wall from like the late 50s. You know, oil on the way or gas on the way. And
from the 50s. I love it.
Yeah, you know, it's really funny. But, you know, we've come closer each time. But, you know, these things do take time. And there's always other priorities that come into play, or projects. Or, you know, if you had the same leaders for 30 straight years all across the board, you get a lot more things done. But new leaders come in, and new governors come in, and new council folks, and new mayors. And all of a sudden they try to shift their things. That's why sometimes you see unfinished roads done, or half a bridge or something. It just, the priorities constantly change, where I think you ought to just write that check, move into the project and get it done, period. Because, you know, some people have hooked up to natural gas up here. There is some people that have been trying really hard. They have put in the big tank over here, you know, the LNG plant. So we're getting steps to get there finally. And we've made some real progress. But to me, it's personalities, politics, and money, and things that always seem to sideline these things, which we know are important. And we know they're there. We know they need to be done. But you keep putting it off.
Yeah, if somebody doesn't think it's a big deal, go to Fairbanks in mid-January and have fun breathing outside, because, you know, that smoke just sits there. And what, you know, that's how people, I don't think a lot of people realize there's, you know, people on the show that have never even been listening to the show that have never even been to Alaska. Fairbanks has one of the biggest temperature variances, I think, in the United States. It'll get into the 90s in the summer and negative 30 or 40 or 50 in the winter.
Yeah, we have when I worked on the Riverboat Discovery here for 2 summers, I narrated the cruise for tourists every day. It was a lot of fun, 2012 and 13. And I had to go through these, these things that you just mentioned, bullet points about Alaska. Some of them I never knew until I learned and read it. And one of them is that we do have one of the largest temperature swings in the entire world here.
Wow.
And so, Siberia does too, some areas over there, but because we're in the middle of this bowl and we don't have a ton of wind. I mean, we have wind occasionally, but we just stay steady all the time. So it's either 50 below, and I remember it 60 below when I was a kid here, to 90, 92, 93 degrees. That's a huge gap. I mean, it's a huge gap. And so it's going to take its toll on people. It's going to take its toll on, the roads in town. And without any wind, and you're sitting at 40 below, and you got every car in town running, and you got auto start running all day long, and you got this big mass over the city, which is, of course, the EPA. We violate the EPA rules almost every winter. So that's why we're trying to convert people, to clean coal and don't burn everything in your fireplace. But John, keep in mind that when heating oil is through the roof, it becomes a matter of life or death. People will put anything, and I get it. I know it's not right, but what are you going to do when you have to heat?
Yeah, when it's negative 20 or 30, you're just going to do whatever it takes to get warm, because you literally will die if you don't. And so it's totally understandable. And that's, I always thought, man, a gas line is going to cost a lot of money up to Fairbanks. But if I'm a gas company, I'm like, I'm going to make a crazy amount of money in the winter there. It might be a good investment. So, I really hope you guys eventually get that. But, like you said, whichever way the wind blows, a new politician, a new whatever, and you just never know. And I look back on some of these projects that Alaska has been talking about for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I wonder what a difference it would have made if somebody just pulled the trigger on day one, as opposed to inching along for 20 or 30 years. So
you have so many people that share their own opinions about it, and you hire experts and people to talk about it. And then, look how economy can change in a matter of 3 or 4 years when you start planning. And with COVID, I know I said the C word, but, look what it did to a lot of things. It kind of grinded things to a halt. And so you just never know what's to be expected when you have a 5-year project or whatever.
So you've had a fairly successful political career. You've been on the city council, you've been the mayor, and running the day-to-day operations as the chief administrative officer for the city of Fairbanks. Who's somebody that you've looked up to as a hero over the years, and why do you look up to him?
That's a good question. And I could say the obvious ones like my dad and my mom and everything, but outside of my own family, which I think they deserve a lot of praise, my first political hero was Reagan. And that's when I was in high school, I came up, I was pretty young when Jimmy Carter was president, but once I turned 18, 19, 20, 21, I watched Reagan. I watched him on the national stage, and I started reading books about him and how he was playful and had a good sense of humor, and sometimes was detached from the job too. I mean, everybody has their foibles. I mean, every person that holds an office like that. So I became really interested in presidents in general. And I would say Lincoln was a hero. I loved some of the things he stood for and some of the things he made history with. I read books about John F. Kennedy, and I thought he did some amazing things and what a visionary he was. And I don't care if you have an R or D next to your name or an I or anything else. Everybody brings something good to leadership, I believe. And you have to take the best of those people. So my political hero was probably somebody like Ronald Reagan for sure. And then, music, I'm a music fanatic nut that I sleep and eat and drink. So I'm kind of a Paul McCartney nut, and I really appreciated his contributions to music and just pop culture in general. The Beatles, yeah, I did say the Beatles, and you could decipher their lyrics all day long. And I think that when I gave a speech recently to some high schoolers, and I said, one of the things you should do in your life is listen to the Beatles and check out some of those lyrics. And people thought that was funny, but not bad words to live by when music is part of your life, like it's a good part of mine. So Ronald Reagan, Paul McCartney and other world leaders, of course, have always been the people I've looked at. And locally in town, I was good friends with Wayne Nelson, our prior mayor. Jerry Cleworth taught me a lot about leadership. I worked alongside of him, other people in this town that I really respect. Bernard Gatewood, I served with him on the city council. I really praise him for helping me through some things. So my list of heroes is long.
That's awesome. And, Ronald Reagan is the original Make America Great Again slogan maker for his presidential campaign. So a lot of folks my age and younger don't realize that it was Reagan that actually coined that phrase. So I think Reagan is a good guy to look up to. And man, he's one of those presidents that a lot of people on this show in particular look up to. So that's awesome to hear that he's one of your heroes. I think that's awesome. So one of the questions I have for you, Mayor, is taking off your mayor hat. You're running for office. Tell folks about what you're running for and how that campaign is going for folks that are listening in and hearing you for the first time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I've always wanted to follow the path of a slow climb, right? That's why I started on city council, because I believe that local government's kind of where it's at. There are people that go from 0 to 100. They'll be at home and then they'll run for something really big. And sometimes it works, and that's great. But I chose the way to go up slow, build my base, city council, city mayor, and now I'm running for state senate to represent the interior of Alaska, because we have an interior delegation of House members and Senate members. So I decided to run for a seat. Senator Kawasaki, Scott Kawasaki, who's been in Juneau for I think 16 years now, and a lot of those years in the House. Now he's in the Senate, and his reelection is coming up the same as mine. So I kind of looked about a year ago and said this makes good sense to try to move and keep the momentum going. Really, because I just love public service. So I am running for state senate, and with the redistricting now, John, it's districts 31 and 32, which encompasses most of Fairbanks, pretty much all of Fairbanks, and then all of Wainwright and some on Badger Road in the North Pole zip code area, and that's known as Seat P. So the campaign has been tremendous. I've been really flattered, actually, and humbled by all the support. The primary looked really good. I know you covered a lot of the primary. I think I was 2.5 points back. And there's a third person, another Republican, ranked choice. I was really curious how that would all play out, because just this week, everything has changed for the Congress, for the state. But I just feel great. I love running. I like knocking and talking, as they say. And so does Senator Kawasaki, and he's very good at it too. But being a local Fairbanks guy, I think that I can bring the same enthusiasm that I did mastering communications with the public, like I have been, try to be a go-to person, respectful, polite, because I didn't make everybody happy as mayor. I know that 100%, but I was never less than polite to people, if nothing else. And I'll bring that same discourse down to Juneau. And it's been a dream of mine since high school, really, to go to Juneau to ultimately serve the interior.
That's awesome. So you're running against Senator Kawasaki. Mm-hmm. What, as you're knocking on doors and whatnot, what are some things that set you apart from him in terms of policy?
Well, that's a good question. One of the advantages I do have, and this goes with other people who haven't had a chance to be elected yet, if this is their first time reaching for the Senate or the House, I've been able to be on a city council and be elected as mayor. So I've had 4 terms in a row, right? So I've been able to balance budgets really well, be in the ground floor for local ordinances and changes that have come up. And I can bring that to Juneau. Senator Kawasaki, of course, also served on the city council. So I'm not saying he never served locally. But when it comes to policy, everybody talks about the 2 biggies, which are like permanent fund. Everybody talks about permanent fund and social issues. Since I've never served in the Senate or the House, and I studied a lot on the PFD, I have to kind of look and figure that out a little bit more. If I start talking like an expert, I won't be an expert. So the PFD seems to be a little polarizing with a lot of people. And how much should we get? How do we get it? What's the equation? What's the math? How does that work? Well, that's my dog. Sorry. So I think that might set us apart as our views on things. I know he's a Democrat, more liberal than I am. I'm a little more conservative than him, but it doesn't mean you can't work with the other team. You have to work with the other team. And when I think about Reagan, I think about Reagan and Tip O'Neill, that famous duo. And I think that even President Bill Clinton was really good working both sides and talking to people, because that's what it takes. It doesn't matter what letter you have. If you are so far apart that you can't get this close together, and that's something else, John. When I go to Juneau, you've got a far right 10% that can be a little off the chain. You got a far left 10% that can be off the chain. And those two groups never talk. They throw rocks. And those of us in this middle 80, I call it, we just dodge the rocks. So these extreme don't get much work done. I think centrists and people who are willing to come together near the middle, at least partly to the middle, it won't be 50-50 all the time. It could be 70-30, 80, 60-40. They get the work done. And that's what I want to do. So when I'm talking to folks at their doors, they'll say, what are you going to do? How are you going to communicate with people? And I just say the same way I always did here. Call the other folks. And keep in mind, too, I was mayor during some pretty tense years. We had some protests, and I met with those groups. I talked to them and said, listen, I got no problems with what you want to do, but let's talk about being civil and polite and have good discourse. And I led the city through a pandemic, and I had people on both sides of me yelling what to do. And so I just did what I thought was best by communicating to the public.
Yeah, I think a lot of times especially now in this kind of polarizing place that we're in, it's for some reason only the extreme sides get attention. And Alaska, it's oftentimes people forget that there's more registered nonpartisans than there are registered Democrats or registered Republicans, and I believe that stat's still true. And those people vote. And, I think there's something to be said for kind of your strategy behind listening to both sides. And, if somebody were to turn on the news today, mainstream media, you would hear one side say, the other side's the worst, horrible people in the world. Then you'd hear, you'd hear Fox News say that, and then you'd hear CNN say the exact same thing. And all we ever hear is basically the other side calling each other stupid. And that's why nothing ever gets done. So I applaud your strategy, and it's going to be close. I think I could be wrong, but I think you were only trailing by maybe 100 or so votes, 200 votes.
Yeah, that's right. And it was only 20% turnout in the primary, and there's going to be more in the general. How much more, I don't know. I wish voting would get to 100% of everybody, but it doesn't. So will it be 30% turnout, 40, 50? I don't know, because I've never run for a statewide race. I know in the city of Fairbanks, unfortunately, even though I won and I was grateful, those turnouts were low. Yeah. That's just the way it normally goes. But this is a bigger year. You're talking about a senator, a governor, a replacement. Mary Peltola is now the interim, I guess is what you call her, acting. And then, that's a big race. And then you've got 40 some seats all over the state up. So I think it's going to increase. Even without a presidential election year, I think it's going to increase numbers, I hope. And if there's anything to be said for the Trump years and through the pressure years that we've had and this pressure cooker we've been in, if there's anything positive that's come out of all this back and forth and negativity, it's really spotlighted voting a whole lot more. You hear voting talked about a lot more. And I'm all for that. I'm all for voting. In fact, that's what I told all my kids. I have 6 kids. You vote and you volunteer. You do those 2 V's. As a youngster, you volunteer all the time. You take the spotlight off of yourself and put it to someone else a little bit more, which I've tried to do here, and vote. You got to vote, and you have to vote, because it does matter. If you don't think one vote matters, just talk to Bart LeBon and Catherine Dodge. Go talk to them, and they'll tell you 2 votes counted in that one.
Yeah, 2 votes. They won what? That
It was a 1 vote split. And if you don't vote, so if you support John and you don't support Jim, and you don't vote, you voted kind of for the other team. You can't waste your vote, and you need to vote. You need to do your homework on the people. You'll never align 100% with everything anyone says, but you should find the person you relate to the most and who stands for most of the things that you stand for. So vote. It's so important. So anyway, that's what I spend my time talking to the public about.
Nice.
And people will say, I didn't agree with what you did here, but by golly, you've talked to me, you're polite to me, you heard me out. And that's why local politics has set me up perfectly for working down in Juneau. It really has.
So how does somebody get in touch with your campaign? Let's say they want to volunteer or, cut you a check or make phone calls for you. Tell us what your website is, how somebody gets in touch with you. Where are you on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram?
Yeah, thanks, John. One of the best things I did was 15 years ago, I bought my domain name. So jimmatherly.com, which is easy. And that's both M's, Jimm. So and there you can donate and sign up. You can Facebook message me all day long. I return every single message. I call every single person back if you leave a phone number every single time, with the exception of one or two. I rarely forget to call anyone back. Jim Matherly for State Senate @gmail.com is an email. You can email me, Jim Matherly for State Senate, and that's all spelled out. You don't need to worry about Alaska in there. You can email me and I'll always reach out to you and answer questions to the best of my ability. I don't make up answers, and if I don't know the answer, I'll try to look it up. But part of the reason I want to go to Juneau is to become more familiar with how the state works on a larger level. I know the local level now. It just makes good sense to go up to the state level. And I'll tell you what someone told me in the primary, John. It was pretty interesting. They said, Jim, you're going to go from one of 7 voices, because there's 6 on the council plus me I can vote to, tiebreakers and stuff. So I'm one of 7 voices affecting 30,000 lives to going one of 20 people in the Senate affecting 700,000 lives.
Yeah,
that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And unless you're willing to come and talk to people like this, or if you stay way out here, that doesn't work well for the masses. If you're totally extreme and immovable, you will not, that's not good for the masses as a whole. Then you're tunnel vision. You have got to open up that tunnel, or just stay, or just don't run for elected office if you don't like working with people. And I love working with people, even angry people. I try to learn from.
Yeah, one of the things that I found very quickly when I became when I worked at the chief of staff for the Kenai Peninsula Borough is, oftentimes I'm a conservative. We fire shots off the bow at government, often, and we talk about bloated budgets and wasteful spending and all those kinds of things, which I think are important. But at the end of the day, what I found out is just normal people working at the borough trying to do the best that they can do. There's no real conspiracy other than it's just a bunch of folks doing their jobs. And just like any other company, there's going to be good and bad employees. But for the most part, a bunch of great folks doing what they can to make the borough a better place. And I think we've missed the human element sometimes as we talk about these kinds of things.
I've said that a million times. I am not the smartest guy at the city, nor am I the most skilled at the city. That's the 200 employees that work for the city, because I'm not going to come plow your road or come to your aid with a fire truck. That's the fire department and the police and public works. So I know I'm there as the leader for them, and I cheerlead them. And I've had to let a few people go, and that's fine, because it may not be the best fit. But you're right, the human element has to take a role, no matter what. If you don't like people, then don't run for politics. It's pretty simple. But if you like people and you're compassionate and you're a good listener, then politics is a wonderful profession. It is truly wonderful and rewarding. And I just love the work. I really love it.
Well, Mayor, I really appreciate you joining us on the Must Read Alaska show. For folks that have wanted to check out his campaign, we'll put the link in our episode as we post it to iTunes and Spotify and iHeartRadio, and the list goes on. So thanks again, Mayor, for joining us. Good luck in your race. And until next time, from somewhere in Alaska, I'm John Quick signing off. Thanks again, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.